Anyi County and Wanli District are both located northwest of Nanchang City. Both Anyi and Wanli are sprinkled with picturesque old villages that seem as if industrialization has simply passed them by. But that impression is not entirely correct. In the early 1970s, when China was going through one of the largest social and economic experiments in history, an experiment of the grandest scale, these two backwater regions of Jiangxi were not overlooked, for a while at least. Following China's Great Leap Forward in 1958 and the Great Famine that followed, China's economy was in shatters. Many in the party leadership believed that the third five-year plan should solve the problems of food, clothing, and other necessities. The plan got objections from Mao, who believed that the third five-year plan should focus on industry. Mao believed there was a possibility that China could be involved in another war. China's population and industries were almost entirely concentrated on the East Coast. Mao feared that China's industrial base was too susceptible to airstrikes. Major transportation hubs, bridges, ports, and dams were all close to major coastal cities. Destruction of these infrastructure could lead to disaster. Mao therefore believed that developing defense and heavy industries is the priority. The discussion was brought to an end after the August 1964 Gulf of Tonkin incident, the Vietnam War which quickly escalated, and the massive bombing of North Vietnam that followed. On September 14, 1965, the Central Planning Commission submitted the final proposal for the third five-year plan, with a focus on the Third Front movement, a massive industrial endeavor. It involved large-scale investment in national defense, technology, heavy industries, and transportation. The movement covered around 13 provinces and autonomous regions within the interior of the country. Between 1964 and 1980, more than 1,100 large and medium-sized projects were established in the Third Front region. Thousands of plants and hundreds of thousands of workers moved from big coastal cities to the mountains in the west. Third Front projects were motivated by national defense considerations. Plants were required to be hidden in the mountains and were not allowed to be geographically clustered to minimize the damage from airstrikes. As the Cultural Revolution went into full gear, factories were required to be hidden in caves. Like much else in the Cultural Revolution, this principle was used to an extreme. About 90% of the 400 new Third Front projects in Jiangxi, for example, were located in places far away from cities. An airplane factory in Hanzhong was divided into 28 plants that were spread across 2 districts and 7 counties. One of these plants was further spread across 7 separate villages. Not all was bad, however. Large projects such as the Chengdu-Kunming Railway, Panzhihua Iron and Steel, and the Second Auto Works helped stimulate previously poor and agricultural economies in China's southwest and northwest. These plants continued to be economic pillars for the local economies. Small Third Front regions that included the mountainous and rear parts of each province in the rest of China were under provincial governments. The purpose of these small Third Fronts was to make individual provinces capable of self-defense in the event of war. Factories that produced conventional weapons and heavy industries were similarly built in or moved to these regions. In 1969, the Jiangxi Provincial Revolutionary Committee decided to move the province's industrial and mining enterprises to a newly formed county northwest of Nanchang. In order to facilitate the movement of large amounts of machinery, equipment, and personnel, it was decided to build the Wanli Railway. Construction of the railway began in May 1970 with the participation of up to 18,400 laborers and military personnel, of which no more than 60 were engineers. By October 1st of the same year, the Wanli Railway was officially opened and served 5 stations. By the end of the 1970s, Wanli had around 80% of the factories in Nanchang, including a dozen radio factories, factories producing electric tubes, televisions, air conditioners, and motorcycles. As relations with the US warmed up after Nixon's China trip in 1972, investment in the Third Front movement gradually declined. China's economic reforms and economic policies of the 1980s once again focused on the East Coast. As a result, many state-owned enterprises were on the verge of bankruptcy, and in the seventh five-year plan between 1986 and 1990, third front plants not making a profit were allowed to shut down. Most economists are in agreement that the third front movement was an economic fiasco. Billions of yuan and millions of workers were devoted to projects that were badly designed and badly implemented. Overall achievements were limited. It was simply the wrong economic plan in the wrong place at the wrong time. Wanli, Nanchang's small third front, was no different. Freight volume on the Wanli Railway decreased yearly in the 1980s. By the early 1990s, the Wanli Railway was limited to the transport of stone. Shortly after, it was completely abandoned and the tracks removed. During my visit to Wanli on the outskirts of Nanchang, I saw no sign of Wanli's glorious industrial past, except for an abandoned train station surrounded by beautiful forested hills. I'm walking where the old tracks used to be. This is where the old tracks